Okay, cool. Should we get going then? Brilliant. Okay, well, a massive warm welcome to everybody who has joined us this morning. Thank you so much. We've got loads of you joining us today, which is fantastic. My name is Anna Rasmussen. I'm the founder and CEO of OpenBlend. If you don't know who OpenBlend is, we're a next generation performance management tool that enables inclusive one-to-ones. I am absolutely thrilled and delighted to be joined by Joanna Abeyie this morning, who is the founder and MD of Blue Moon Consulting, and is the interim head of creative diversity at the BBC. So, I mean, there's a little introduction, but Joanna, I don't know if you just kind of want to say hi and tell everyone a little bit about your background.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, Anna. Morning, everybody. It's really, really nice to be here. Yes, I am, as Anna said, the founder and director of Blue Moon, and so we specialise in executive search, diversity data and analytics, and consultancy, which focuses really on cultural transformation. So looking at the entire employee life cycle, including sort of attraction, recruitment, retention, and promotion. And the retention bit is where Anna's brilliant tool, OpenBlend, really comes in. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I'm currently at the moment at the BBC, just supporting them while they go through quite a transitional period as their head of creative diversity. So I'll be there for another 5 months.
Excellent. Well, yes, that's an excellent gig, isn't it?
It's good fun. It's good fun.
Fascinating. What Joanna hasn't mentioned, I knew you wouldn't, so I've got this prepared, that Joanna has an MBE, that she was awarded in 2020. You've got to shout about these things. That was awarded in 2020 for her services to diversity and inclusion in the creative and media industry. So we've got a fantastic mind that we can pick into today. So thank you so much for that. So today is very much about a Q&A style format. So I've got a load of questions already laid out, which is brilliant. And I am going to be asking Joanna those questions. And also we're recording the session, just so you know, a little bit of housekeeping, recording the session. And also when you do ask questions and comment, you're all very good at this already because we've got loads of comments in there. But if you can share it with everybody so we can all kind of see the questions that are coming through. Obviously, we won't be able to answer all of them, but we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. So before we get started, I'm just going to set the scene a little bit. And I thought what was quite interesting, a few weeks ago, we ran an event, a roundtable event with Jeffrey Williams, who's the VP of ED&I at Burberry. So we ran this event and we had some fantastic attendees there. But it came out quite quickly at the beginning that everybody that was there is kind of at the beginning of their journey with this. So they might have been toying around with it, had some good intent around it, but actually they were kind of struggling how to really get started. So I'm going to make the assumption that a lot of people on the call today kind of feel the same way. So we're going to ask a lot of the kind of questions that we're going to be asking Joanna are going to be focused in on that as well. So, not making any assumption that people are much further down the journey or not. So ED&I is absolutely at the forefront of people's minds, and for very good reason. So you might, I'm sure, would know all the stats and the reasoning for why this is so important. But just to kind of put this on the table as a kind of context setting, diverse companies are more profitable. So the McKinsey released the report where 36% more profitability in organizations who are in the top quartile for ethnic and cultural diversity. I think we all know those stats. The ones that I think are really interesting around customers are increasingly care more about diversity. So 83% higher consumer preference for those organizations that are more diverse and have more inclusive cultures. Diverse companies have stronger recruitment and retention. So 86% of candidates say that it's really important to them. 70% of job seekers said that they really value that. I've actually got a real example when I was chatting to an organization about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where they have an attrition issue, and I asked some questions as to why. The last 2 people that have left the organization have cited lack of diversity as the reason why they're moving on. So when your people start voting with their feet because the culture that they're working in isn't diverse or inclusive enough, you know at that point that this is like urgent, that we need to start moving on with this. So I think, when we've probably all got stories on that. So I've got a strong opinion myself that actually when you're looking at D&I, what we have to start with is the inclusive culture, because without the culture being right, the inclusive culture being right, you can put all this amazing effort into recruiting diverse workforce, but when those people come in and they look around and they can't see people that look like them, think like them, organize, that they're not going to stay. So the inclusive culture is really important. So, and that's my opinion. But Joanna, if we start off maybe with that, Joanna, do you agree with that the culture is the first thing to focus on?
Absolutely. I think culture is that usually when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, the diversity is the thing that you can hope in some instances. It's a visual thing. It's how many individuals from particular backgrounds make up your business, but the bit you can't see and that you can't feel is how an organization makes you feel, how that space actually fit, what's that culture like. And quite often when we talk about diversity and inclusion, businesses think that or certainly the organizations I deal with, they think that they can do something about the diversity because that's a recruitment or an attraction process. And then they kind of don't know how to do something about the culture. And I always say the culture is not kind of like swimming above us or sort of to the left and to the right. We are making the culture. Yeah. We as the people in the organization are making the culture. So quite often when organizations or people within them sort of say, I'm not quite sure how to change this, we can start with ourselves. And then hopefully that inspires some action. So rather than it feel like a huge kind of mountain that you're trying to you're trying to move, actually you can do it one person at a time, and that may take a bit longer, but typically people tend to like get the vibes, if you like, off of inspiring, motivating people. And if you start to lead in a really empathetic and productive way, then you start to see that feeling or that apathy that comes around a culture that doesn't feel very inclusive start to very quickly change, because believe it or not, most people are feeling what you're feeling. And so suddenly when you start to change the behavior, they're really keen to join on and to do the same thing. So I think we kind of don't realize how much power we have in changing the culture, and we kind of see the diversity piece as a bit more of a proactive thing that we can do, but actually we can do something about the inclusive culture too.
Yeah, so just through the behavior. So we'll come on to that, because I think that is we're starting to look at like the solution part there, which is fantastic, and we want this, by the way, everyone, for this to be really solution orientated. So we want you to be able to walk away at the end of this with some with some ideas and some things that you can actually put in practice, because I think then will be a really good use of your time. So Joanna, can we go back? How do you work? So when you go into organizations, how do you work with them on a consulting basis? Why do they call you in? What do you do with them? What's the process?
Yeah, so the most common part of our practice that seems to get the most engagement at the moment are our inclusion audits, and they're very bespoke and tailored to the organisation that we're dealing with. So ultimately what we would do is, because it comes back to that culture piece, is we come in and we look at the people cycle. So we look at how people join your organisation, so through the attraction, how you've recruited them, so what that process looks like, the culture you create for them to be able to thrive and develop and work to their best, and then how you develop them and grow them and then progress them in the business. So we kind of break that down into four parts. So we do a big deep dive into attraction, a really big deep dive into recruitment, and the same for culture and the same for progression. Now, the reason that businesses tend to want to do that is they tend to be of a similar mind to me, if you like, in that what we don't want, as much as I said that people change the culture, what you don't want is the culture to rely just on the people. So we still need processes, you still need systems that state that when that individual leaves, the precedent, the foundation has already been set. So in a way, it's a bit like what we would do with OpenBlend. If you've already introduced a way in which we have conversations and gauge insight into how people are feeling, as well as where they want to get to in their careers, if that's embedded, whether it's Joanna or Anna there, that's still a system that sits in place, and hopefully, if used as it should be, ensures that this level of or this approach to inclusion remains. So sometimes what reason we go through it in that way is we're trying to, sometimes the inequities are hidden in the systems. and in the processes and in our procedures. So that's why we take that approach.
Yes.
And then the cultural bit comes in, where we start to remind people, and I think Shannon's touched on it in the chat, remind people that you too as individuals can then speak to what this culture looks and feels like. So typically businesses come to us when they want to change the systems and the processes and match that with the energy and the efforts of their people, because otherwise it's no good you having all the energy, enthusiasm in the people, and then they leave with all that empathy and openness, and then the culture goes right back to what it was.
Yeah, I love that. The inequities are hidden in the processes.
Yeah.
And some people just need a fresh pair of eyes, because they might have been, these processes might have been put together with good intent, but actually they're full of bias, right?
Absolutely.
And then you go in with these fresh eyes to look at it. Inclusion audit. I love that. Okay, brilliant. So what is it, because people have come to you already. So when you go into work with an organization, they've already come to you. What stage of the journey are they at when they come to you?
Typically they've started, it's a combination. They've either started some initiatives or some attempts at changing their culture and the diversity of their workforce, and haven't seen the progression they'd like to have seen, haven't seen the impact that they'd hoped for.
Right. And roughly how long have they been working on at that and getting frustrated without seeing results?
Sometimes a couple of years.
Right.
Because what they do is they try a number of things. If one thing doesn't work, they think that might just have been the attempt, the effort we made. Maybe it needs to look slightly different. Yeah. So sometimes it's a couple of years.
Okay.
Sometimes it'll also be, look, we're hiring for our senior execs and we just don't seem to be getting much diversity in the pool that are coming through. And so then they're coming to us saying, where are those individuals, and can you help us be attractive to them, or can you at least help us to source them and bring them to our attention? And sometimes that's been going on a very long time.
Yeah.
And other times they are actually a lot further ahead in that they've got a strategy, they've got all of these pockets of activity, but they're not joining up those activities in a way that's actually productive. So if I can give you an example, most organizations have network groups.
Yeah.
But typically what I've seen is that those network groups are almost used as places for individuals to share and discuss how they're feeling.
Yes.
And some of the inequities they face. They're not necessarily used as places for intelligence for senior execs, for solutions, or for intervention. So, for example, a particular organisation who I've done some work with, big publishing organisation, their network groups were so involved in HR, so involved in the people team, that their Pride network actually wrote alongside the HR team their transitioning policy. So that transitioning policy has actually been made by individuals within their workplace, alongside some support from a charity in HR, who have experienced transitioning from male to female or female to male. So there is real value in engaging with your network groups, because actually you then create a policy with equity at its heart, because it's been made by individuals who would be impacted by the policy. But so often those groups are just things that people turn up to and hear, what can sometimes feel like a large number of complaints, which for someone in HR who's maybe, or in people or in talent, who've been making lots of effort to try and change that can be quite a disheartening experience, because you think, goodness me, I've tried to do so much and actually we've got such a long way to go. Whereas actually,
sorry,
I was going to go on.
I was just going to say, because actually the way you describe that is that actually these network groups, I'm kind of visualizing, they're quite almost siloed, aren't they? That you get actually like-minded people in similar situations in one room together, as you said, like talking about their issue, and how does that then filter out of that environment? So by their nature, they're quite exclusive.
They can be, but they can be used so much for so much more. And quite often, one thing I always say is, if you've got network groups, I think when you're having a board meeting or a senior management meeting, why not invite the chair from one of those network groups to kind of be, or rotate so everyone gets visibility of who's in those groups. But I think you need to get up to the table and sort of say, this is what we're feeling, this is what this group is sort of suggesting are the inequities. So yes, it's important that they're engaged with people, but you know, do you get any visibility of your CEO? Do they know who you are? Do they know who's in that group and what you're talking about?
Yeah, what you're
you
talking
might be
about.
nervous.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because you might be nervous to invite them along to a network, to your network group, because you might think no one's going to speak that freely. But actually, if you've got people who do feel comfortable and confident, to sit and to, you know, to do a 10-minute or 15-minute presentation on the themes and the feelings and the things that are happening for people from those backgrounds, then one, you get the visibility in front of the very senior people within your organization, and two, you get the ear of them. So I just think they can be used so much more beneficially. So sort of to answer your question, it's sometimes there is activity going on, it's just not being used in an effective way. Yeah. And one thing that organizations use a lot, I think overuse, is the term best practice.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should be looking at best practice, because there's lots of things that are best practice and they're actually not fit for purpose. So it's effective practice. Has it affected any change? Has it resulted in any change? Because you can have best practice all day long, and you'd have, you know, most organizations work to best practice, and we are where we are. So we need to get changing that to has the changes that we've made or the things we've implemented been effective in moving anything on?
Even that mindset there. So if you're right, you know, if you have these network groups, how are you going to use those network groups to create change, to affect change, to move forward, to be innovative? Because then that's just a question where I mean, the majority of organizations would have these networks anyway. What can you do from those to create change? And it'll be different for every organization, but I love that they're writing HR policies. And also people out of those groups to create HR policies is brilliant.
And when you have a group, for example, that is, you know, that is a network group that is for deaf, disabled or neurodivergent talent, I don't understand. I've never understood why organizations do not use them to proof their website. Is it accessible?
Yeah.
To double check the formats in which you send out application forms. Are they accessible and attractive to those with neurodiverse needs? You know, you've got those individuals in your organization. Yeah. Why not use them? If you don't have them, why not ask organizations and charities that exist to give those individuals equity in the business to have a look at your website, to have a look at your forms?
So why I mean, when you're talking about this, it seems so logical. Why don't people do it?
I don't know. I always say the same. I ask the same question, Anna. I don't understand. It's so funny because yesterday I could share this. I think it's okay. We within the BBC, one of the ladies in my team, she works in children's, and she looks at diversity and inclusion in children's, and they did a focus group last night, which I just sat in on, with 5 children under the age of 10, and they all had they were deaf, disabled or neurodivergent, and they were asking them about how they want to be portrayed on screen and off screen. And this little girl was about 8, and she just said, you know, you don't have to necessarily have people that work with you who have Asperger's, which is what she had. But she said, but you could always ask someone with Asperger's. And I just thought, like, that's such such a obvious thing to do. So you may not have that diversity in your team. And then this little boy called Kai, who had cerebral palsy, he said the same thing. He just went, which was really sweet. He said, like, you know, you could also ask a charity like the people I work that support me how to help children with cerebral palsy to feel like important and not that they're sort of tossed to the side. These are his words. And so I was like, this is a child that acknowledged
we need to get these kids in there.
Yeah, we were all saying they needed their own consultancy, but they were just so good at like just saying the obvious thing. So sometimes as well, I think, I don't know why we don't think about it obviously, but I think it's like you kind of have to have a can-do approach. So it's almost, you've got to almost think about things as if it's your own little baby or your own organization. If someone told you no, like, what would you do to get around that? If you didn't have that resource, and Anna, you'll know this, like, you know, from having your own organization, when you get a barrier, you just think about how to get around it. You don't kind of use that to not get to the next step. So it's the same thing. It's like, if you're thinking, I don't have that diversity in my team, you kind of, but I do need to understand the experiences of those individuals. What can I do? Obviously, you're not going to walk over to someone in the street and say, could you talk to me about But there are, you could just Google, you could watch YouTube videos. There's so many things that you could do to give you a bit of insight.
Do you think that, just as you're speaking there, and that there's a confidence or a what's okay to ask, or so if you've got some neurodiverse individuals in your organization, to pull them to one side and ask them about their experience? Do you think people, of course, framed in the right way, it's a hugely positive thing, but do you think people have a bit of fear about sort of pulling,
Yeah, I mean, absolutely don't do that. I hope that's not what I said. Absolutely don't go over to someone in your team who you think identifies with the characteristic that you're trying to get some education on. Absolutely don't do that. I think you can use your network groups because they've self-selected themselves to be able to speak to some of those experiences.
So there's a self-selection. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And it's charities and organizations who exist to provide equity for individuals. And the question you just asked is, most of those organizations are aware that people are afraid to get it wrong. They would have spoken to individuals that are nervous about that day in, day out. So there's no problem ringing one of them up or organizing a meeting and saying, look, I'm really trying to diversify my talent pool. I'm really trying to make my work culture much more inclusive, but I don't know what I don't know. So it would be really, really, really useful if I could have a chat with you and hopefully get some understanding of what I need to look out for. What, show me my blind spots, show me the bits that I wouldn't necessarily recognize because it's not my lived experience. Send an email like that. People will be more than happy to say, totally understand, where you are, and then they'll take you through the things you should consider.
And what an amazing project for someone to work on, like that level of curiosity and understanding and I think that would be an absolute privilege to be in a position to be kind of working on something like that as well. Okay, what when you go into organizations, what issues are you typically faced with?
So we've still got this age-old challenge of where is all the diverse talent. Which I've been doing this about almost 15 years now, and I was asked the same question then as I am now. So we are moving forward. That's not to be pessimistic and to discourage everyone's great efforts, because I know the intention is there and we're all trying really hard. But that question is still a really key question that I'm asked a lot of the time. And my answer is always, and has always been quite similar, although it has changed, is try and, if I can answer it really briefly, and I know it's solutions focused today, so try and think about where, if you were that individual, so if I'm looking for somebody who is disabled, if I'm looking for somebody of a particular faith or of a particular ethnic group or gender, or if I want to bring that, I want to get access to that broad range of people, I think it's kind of thinking about, where would I look for jobs if the route I go down, I don't seem to get ahead. If I value diversity and inclusion, what would I want to see on this website?
Yes.
When I join it. If I value inclusion and feeling like I can be myself, what would I expect to see on that business's social media networks?
Or their Glassdoor or something like that.
Yeah, or their Glassdoor. Yeah. So sometimes just think, am I positioning myself? Am I almost, think about, it's really random, but even on the dating market, let's put it in that way, like you would position yourself in a way that is attractive. If you go into a speed dating thing, or whatever. So it's like, how are you positioning yourself to be attractive to your potential candidates? And if you want that diversity, then think about, how would I want to see myself represented? I wouldn't want it to feel tokenistic. I wouldn't want it to feel like Noah's Ark, like 2 by 2 in an image. I might just want the language to speak to me. And that's why I say the charities will tell you like what language to use, like phrases like we are an equal opportunities employer. It just sounds so formal.
Yes.
Even changing that to something like, we welcome everyone here and we thrive on the diversity of our business. Like we've got people work, talk to the fact that you are a diverse organization. We're a global organization, which means we really benefit from the diverse thoughts and experiences that we gain globally. You know what I mean? Speak to those that in a real way, as opposed to the kind of generic lines, if you've done something really exciting, even as much as like, if you've done a race for life, if you've done a bake sale, if you've done any of these things, you know, like put it out there. These are things that are just show or give a bit of insight into what it's like in your organization.
Yeah. It's lifting the lid, isn't it? It's saying, actually, this is what it's like to work here. I love that dating analogy. I think that's one that, I mean, it's, you know, we can, well, I personally, but if I was in that situation, I know you could, because it's like anything. If you're going, I mean, it makes complete sense. What are you showing people? And I think that's, and you know, any work that you're doing with charities, or that should be all over your website, shouldn't it? Because it shows the values, and
that you care, that there's something that you're thinking about, and just little things like, there was even on welcome packs sometimes, you know, when you start a job, sometimes even then you're like, oh goodness, this isn't really, you may say yes to a job and then you see the welcome pack and you're like, oh, I don't know if this isn't what I thought it was. But little things like, if you have a breakfast bar, talk about that. People like that. People do business with people, right? Like they like that. Oh, they thought about the fact that I need to start my day eating something healthy and I might be rushing around. You know, if you talk about, like, you can even make jokes, you can use language. One of the big brands I absolutely love that do this so well is Tony Chocolonely. And we sat on a panel together at the London Stock Exchange some years ago, and they did such cool stuff. So their website, when you go to it, it explains their whole ethos of where their chocolate comes from, the fact that they're fair trade, the fact that they invest in the places where they get their cocoa from. So you're already getting values. Then they say all these cool things like, every year you get a pair of trainers, so that you get a budget for a pair of trainers so that you can run off all the chocolate you've been eating, or which obviously excludes people that can't walk or stand. But the point that they're trying to talk to, like, they're trying to make a bit of their personality come through in the language that they're using. They give you a bonus if you have a child and call it Tony. So there's all these like funny things, like you get a bonus if your name's Tony. So it's just like these things that come out of it, and they don't give you a name based on your so you could be, you're like chief chocolatier, or like, do you see what I mean? So that you're getting an insight. Oh God. Sorry, I didn't know about that, Shannon. Didn't say that on the panel. Thanks for highlighting that. I didn't know that at all. Today had a huge amount of fat. Oh God, no. So I didn't know about that. Sorry, but they spoke about the sort of personality. So God,
they're just putting out that.
Really, I think bad example. But
going, like, talking and looking at OpenBlend and how we work. So obviously OpenBlend is a tool that recognizes that no one size fits all. Everyone's different. Everyone needs to be supported in a different way to thrive in their work. And all of our clients use OpenBlend in their employee value proposition. So that's, isn't it? So if you come, we recognize you as an individual person. There's no one size that fits all here. And I think that's you know, those kind of things that you do, processes that you have, shout about them all up front. So
absolutely. And there's a question from Maria there.
Yes.
Does part of the solution lie in the organisations doing more to develop and progress the talent that they already have? So I think there's something that's really interesting in that. So they absolutely could be doing more, and that's where I think is a good segue into OpenBlend, because often if you kind of look at if you do an analysis of your data of the people that make up your organisation, and then you look at the themes as to where they are in the business, as in the roles that they have, you can start to see some patterns based on choices and based on the sorts of things that they're doing. Now, if you're having a conversation via a platform like OpenBlend, the reason why I thought it was beneficial, and there was an organisation, Immediate Media, that I worked with, which is where I actually found out about OpenBlend in the first instance. What was so brilliant was it wasn't just conversations about your career and where you wanted to get to next. It was conversations about how you feel, which means that if you're in a position of where you feel there are inequities that are making it difficult for you to move forward, this is the place where you can kind of absorb that and have a conversation about that. Why it's also useful is it can be a place of education, right? So I think, to answer your question, absolutely, there is a solution in the fact that you should be spending time on that talent. But the only way to really develop that talent is to understand what's going on for them. So I'll give you an example. Some individuals may feel that they've been passed up, they've been ignored when opportunities have come up for jobs, for example, and they think that their counterpart who is a male or their counterpart who's able-bodied has been able to get that job, even though they exhibit those skills. Now, why it's useful to have something like OpenBlend is you can have a really open conversation. So you can say, being knocked back that many times has an impact on confidence, it has an impact on well-being, it has an impact on my motivation to work harder and to do more. I think the other point as well that you need to kind of consider, though, is that manager, you sort of saying to that manager, it can feel that there's an inequity here because that person is able to do some of those things because of X. I'm not able to do those things, but I have done these things, which I'm able to do based on my identity, based on my experiences, based on my life background. So it's about also educating them on the fact that sometimes there isn't a space to have that very frank and candid conversation. Well, it would be it is easier for that person to do that, for example, but it's not because of my access needs, for example. So I do it this way. So I am actually demonstrating what you see more clearly through that individual, but you're not seeing it through the lens of my experience. So it teaches that inclusive leadership. It also becomes important because lots of people, for example, want to be a manager, but they don't necessarily always know what a manager does. So I think in our last Investors in People survey, there's 2.1 million accidental managers, for example. So that means they just fall into management. So they don't necessarily know how to manage inclusively. So something like OpenBlend gets them to ask the questions that they wouldn't even have necessarily asked before.
Or just be presented with the motivation and the well-being of that individual person. So you don't even really need to ask it. You've got it.
Yeah, you've got it. Absolutely. So it creates that space where if you have accidentally come into a role of management, there is some, if you like, warehouse around you that gives you something to discuss and to talk about. I also think as well that you can be really honest and say in a session, in a one-to-one session that is through the vehicle of OpenBlend, because you're sort of going, I know you want to be a manager and that is in your sight, but I think there's some skills that we need to develop beforehand. So let's get really strategic about developing those skills. So you absolutely can improve and increase the amount of individuals who are moving up through your business, but that has to be done with transparency and honesty and a real candid approach. And sometimes we are going externally because there isn't enough visibility of the talent we have in the first place within the organization. So you may know the talent to look at them, but you don't know what their skills are because there isn't one central place where people who are more senior can have a look and see where that person is at. So there's also platforms like this that give that middle talent a bit of visibility.
I think it also depends on the confidence of any individual to express their desire to be progressed through the organization. So that, and going back to Maria's point about doing more to develop and progress the talent they already have, that's about progressing and developing diverse talent, right? And celebrating for people for who they are and understanding what their desires are, where they want their career to go, and celebrating it and making a big deal about it as well.
Absolutely.
So you can see it, because going back to the beginning of the conversation where you're talking about the culture and every one person makes a difference. If you're a manager and someone from anyone, I mean, I think there's diversity in every single shape and form now.
There is.
I think everyone's diverse.
They are.
And shout about it and celebrate it and make a big deal about it, and then that will feed in, because then what you're doing is that's the behavior piece, the visual behavior piece.
And why it's brilliant is it holds, especially in the instance of immediate media, it holds people accountable. It holds your manager accountable that we've had this conversation, we've discussed these things. It makes it ensure that there's a follow-up. Have we got you the support we need? Have you got the development that you need? Have I understood what you've said? Have I gone away and done my education? So it holds both parties accountable.
What's your opinion on, because another thing that a lot of organizations do is the networking groups, but also they train managers. So they get managers in a room and they talk to them about bias, they talk to them about managing inclusively. What's your opinion on like training sessions? So you're educating managers on this?
I think I always say people do business with people. So if you're going to educate anyone, I think it's really, really important that it's interactive, that it's not online, it's not a click through training course, it's in person, it's with people with lived experience. So the bit that's different about, I guess, my organisation is that we're made up of people from diverse backgrounds who are all expert in their area. So for example, we've got 3 disabled colleagues, so they are, and also experts in disability in the workplace. So so they're always constantly kind of talking to those lived experiences. So having those individuals in a room and telling you in real life terms what those experiences are like, suddenly as a human being, you start to feel really, you're like, oh, I get it. They're there, that, and you kind of go, it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes you're avoiding some of these conversations because they feel difficult. But then when someone who is a wheelchair user, for example, says, you know, all you have to do is ask what my access needs are. You go, that's all I ask. That's literally all you ask. You know, or if they say, saying you're disability confident doesn't necessarily mean that you are, because you've still got to ask the questions, because, you know, 2 people with the same disability can have very different needs. Oh, is that so? Yeah. Oh, wow. So it just seems so much more, it's back to your point around, it all seems a bit common sense, but it's not until you've got a human being in front of you that's explaining that. You know, somebody who's a trans person can say, what's appropriate to ask and not ask? How can you support me while I'm transitioning? These are really, really, really easy like things to pick up on and to have that conversation.
Do you think they can be done online though? Do you think there's room for, because that, you know, that trying to find individuals to come in and represent different groups, you know, when you're coming in and delivering that training, you know, obviously it's going to be very time consuming, and that's, you know, whereas if you could get kind of snippets of these conversations where as a manager they're exposed to exactly what you're saying and they can empathize with each one, that's going to be more powerful than any bias training or tick box training exercises.
Absolutely, especially during lockdown, everybody's training, even with, you know, that were human interaction training, they were all done online. There's a platform as well called Social Talent, which I've got loads of modules on, and again, it's exactly the same thing that we would do in person, but they're done online. And where you may get nervous to ask questions, you can ask the facilitator, i.e. me or one of the team, in a private chat, and they'll ask a question for you. So
what's that platform called?
Social Talent.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if for example, if it was our organisation doing it for you, you literally on a Zoom or a Meet or a Teams, you can just ask the facilitator the question, and then they can ask the questions because they've already obviously got a relationship with the person who might be running that session. So you don't have to feel nervous about asking. They can frame the question in a way so you could ask it as bluntly or as wrongly as you might like.
Yeah.
And then they can and then they can create the right way to ask that question and have your question answered. So I
think that's so valuable, because I believe a lot of this doesn't come from ill intent. A lot of kind of the avoidance of having any kind of conversation like this isn't from ill intent. It's from getting it wrong.
Absolutely,
having that kind of resource I think is fantastic.
One of our like most popular training sessions is the one that we have with actors. So we ask an organisation to share with us some of their anecdotal experiences, usually through employee resource groups, about how individuals have been treated where they've witnessed microaggressions. And then we get the actors to act it out in 2 to 3 minute scenes. And the reason why it's so useful is because suddenly it's not about you. You're not having to defend yourself personally. No one's identifiable. We're just taking the themes and then created these scenes. And then you're there to kind of put your hand up and go, I kind of see that now. Oh, I understand why that makes them feel that way. And then there's a discussion about that. And you can put your hand up, it's called forum theatre, and suggest that the actors change their response to some of what you've seen. And then what happens is it plays out until all the different ways in which you could have responded and reacted to that scenario are explored. And honestly, we've always run that with senior leadership teams, but also company-wide. And the senior leaders will always say that has been the most impactful training we've had, because now I can see what these microaggressions look like, how they deliver to the person on the receiving end, which actually is macro, not very micro, and also how to create a process in which, if these things happen, what is the right way to respond and sanction those behaviors, if at all. So it's just a really useful way of doing things. Human interaction is the best.
That is so powerful, because people are,
Really
it's objective, so people feel more comfortable suggesting it's a safe environment, and they're just learning and they're seeing it kind of unfold. I think that's really savvy. Yeah,
it's the same with like book clubs, it's the same with watching programs. Make it about the program, so you don't have to offend your colleague that you've been sort of working with for a really long time by saying something that's, you know, that maybe makes them feel as if their experience has been devalued or misunderstood. You know, getting clippings from shows that apparently represent particular characters and discussing whether or not you relate to the way they've been portrayed, or whether you had questions about it, whether you thought, well, I thought that was offensive, but people seem to love that portrayal. You know, it's a way to have a conversation without making it about any one person in the room.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, so we're very sadly, I think everyone will agree with me, coming to the end of this conversation. I could chat to you for ages about this. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for having me.
So if you could give all of our lovely guests two key takeaways for things that they can go and do now, what would they be?
I think I would say, look at your workforce and the groups that are most underserved. Try and engage with organisations who serve those at the right level. So if it's early new entrants, try and find organisations that engage with new entrants. What
do you mean by that?
So if they're individuals that are in the first part of their career, the very early part of the career, try and find organisations that work with those from the backgrounds that you think you're underserving, and then do the same for your experienced hires and the same for your senior talent. And start to engage with them now. Start to invite them to events in your workplace. Start to invite them to roundtables. Start to get to know those individuals, so you're not relying on recruiters or search firms who say that they have this diverse talent pool. Start to talent pool yourself. And if you're a small organisation, work even more effectively with organisations who are doing that work for you. But try your best to create your own pipeline through creating opportunities throughout the year for them to come in, whether it's a hackathon, whether it's a luncheon talking about a particular topic. Get unique about your recruitment. And the other part would be educate yourselves. Don't let not knowing someone, don't let not having someone in your workforce be the reason why you don't understand those experiences. Even a quick Google of things to consider for neurodivergent talent, things to consider for individuals with disabilities, things to think about when it comes to racial disparity, like literally Googling some of those things, doing a bit of reading, and if reading's not your thing, a podcast, if podcast's not your thing, a YouTube clip. And I think that would teach you a great deal about the culture you're trying to create. And any books on allyship would be really brilliant.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm reading Rebel Ideas at the moment.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's an excellent. Yeah, I'm kind of a third of the way through and mind blown already. Yeah, it's
it
great.
Is absolutely.
Right, so we come to the end of our time here. So just to let everybody know, we've got a report around inclusive one-to-ones that we're going to send out to everybody following this session as well. We're also going to send out, if that's okay with you, Joanna, your contact details.
Of course.
Your email, and then we'll send my contact details away as well. We've got the recording of this, so we'll follow up and give you all the relevant. But if you've got any questions, then please do get in touch with us. And but thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Joanna, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. I think we could make a series out of these. That was
I think they're really good, and it's lovely that so many people came along.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. I'll speak to you all soon. Take care. Bye.